Well, I'd say that OCD has two components, which are obsessions and compulsions. Um, when intrusive thoughts come into our minds automatically, most people let them go and don't think anything more about them. But people vulnerable to OCD try to make sense of the thoughts and kind of create hypothetical scenarios in their minds, and develop obsessions this way. Compulsions are mental and physical actions someone does to make the obsessions go away. So these might be praying if the obsession is scrupulosity, washing if it is contamination fears, checking and seeking reassurance if you're afraid of harm coming to yourself or others. Unfortunately, though, people like me, do these actions repeatedly because they get short periods of anxiety relief, showing it is not a long-term solution. And this is something that I figured out with treatment known as exposure and response prevention. I was trapped in an obsessive-compulsive spiral for most of my life without knowing I struggled with OCD. Then a few years ago, several years ago, I happened upon a book about the disorder while in my favourite bookstore. And as I flipped through the pages of this book, I read about intrusive thoughts and realising suddenly, that this was me. So I bought the book and read it in a day. Then, years later, I studied cognitive behavioural therapy. I was really interested in the OCD by this time. And I became a therapist and specialised in obsessive-compulsive disorder. And at that time, I had a desire, to help other people recover the way I did with the exposure and response prevention. Well, if you are someone living with OCD, I understand how horrible it is, to have these unwanted thoughts. So I feel your anxiety there. And I identify with the urges to do compulsions, to get rid of the thoughts and reduce distress. For example, when my scrupulosity OCD was severe, I would pray for forgiveness repeatedly for things I didn't do but thought I did. And if I didn't pray, to me, I was going to hell. And so I know how relief is fleeting when you do compulsions like this, and how intrusive thoughts, images and urges to counter them keep coming back. I also understand if you're a parent watching a child or other relative suffer from this disorder and not knowing what to do, how heart-wrenching that is. When my OCD was severe, my world seemed frightening, lonely, and depressing. My OCD affected some of my friends and family. For example, some of them, would push me to get better even though treatment wasn't available, at the time. And I carried lots of guilt for that. And others, didn't understand OCD, which was frustrating. And to save conflict, I would hide it or try to hide it, the best I could, with certain friends, colleagues, and at home as well. And and on the other hand, I have to acknowledge how other relatives, did support me, but felt stuck, not knowing how best to help me. And this is why, advocacy and raising awareness is so important to me. Yes, I do believe in hope. And if you are someone with OCD, I can understand when you cling to the last bit of hope that will free you from the torment going around inside your mind. It is worth holding on to that last bit of hope, and let me tell you why. Well, first, I want you to know that I've been in remission from OCD since 2012. First, I grappled with pure intrusive thoughts that involved harm, religion, transgender, and other themes for many years. Second, I battled with contamination fears, health anxiety, staring OCD, misophonia, dissociation, PTSD, and social awkwardness. So you can see, the related issues there. But let me stay focused on OCD and give you a further example of this disorder and how I was affected. So a central theme for me was having thoughts of harm and magical thinking around that harm obsession. For example, the thoughts were, if you don't straighten the books on the shelf, you will die at noon and go to hell. That terrified me. And my anxiety would rise at the anticipation of seeing 12 on the clock, whether midnight or noon. So out of fear, I would straighten the books on the shelf. I didn't realise it was a compulsion at that time, and that the more I did it, the more I strengthened the obsession. Obviously at that time I didn't realise that if you resisted doing the compulsions, it would squeeze the obsession. I found that later on. And of course, the more I reinforced the obsession by doing the compulsions, the less I could function and do normal daily activities. And so the only thing I felt I had left at that time was hope and a desire to recover one way or another. So yeah, I believe in hope for that reason. Yeah, at the time, and especially through childhood and early adulthood, I thought I was grappling with the devil and God. But then years later, through my OCD studies, I read about thoughts and how they happen naturally. And so this changed things for me because I realised that we don't create thoughts ourselves. After all, they're biologically generated. And when I say that, I mean, you get the automatic thoughts, but you also get thinking. Thinking is an action, so there's a difference there. And so, yeah, I'm talking about the automatic thoughts where it's similar to the heart. We don't physically make our hearts beat. It just happens because it's automatic. So when I came to understand this, I was enlightened because I saw how I could change how I thought about a thought. But it would involve accepting uncertainty. And that was the horrible part, because when you're facing a hypothetical nightmare, it feels real. But even still, I went with it. And so my new thinking was, I have a thought of dying at noon or midnight and going to hell if I don't straighten the books. And while that might be possible, it's unlikely. So there's a thought. But again, it was a terrifying thing to say at first, because the anticipation of dying and going to hell made me want to escape it. And of course, escaping or avoidance is a compulsion. I could say what's worse is that therapy for OCD doesn't just mean changing the way you think about intrusive thoughts. It also means doing exposure and response prevention, ERP, which is the evidence-based treatment for this disorder that I mentioned earlier. Because I say it's worse, obviously it's better in the long run, but at the time it feels terrible, because it means facing the thing you're fearful of and preventing yourself from making the usual response, which is the compulsion, and to escape that fear. So, going back to the thoughts again, to deal with my imagined fear, I added a coping statement. And for me, that was, either way, I'll resist straightening the books and cope with the prospects of my life. Let me just say that again. Either way, I'll resist straightening the books and cope with the prospect that my life will be over by lunchtime or the end of the day, and that I'll suffer in hell. That sounds terrible. But when you change your thinking about a thought, it does start to help. Of course, at first, my anxiety rose to uncomfortable limits, and it does this when you expose yourself to your fear and prevent the usual response that gives you momentary anxiety relief. But while it's hard at the beginning, it does pay off. ERP does pay off after some time, and with regular practice. Well, it's a scary thought, agreeing to face your fears, not do your safety behaviours, the compulsions, and cope with uncertainty. But when you follow through, when you follow through with ERP, you can be one of the 70 to 80% of people who do recover, and I'm one of those people. But recovery, I'll just say this, recovery means you're in remission. It's not a cure. That means recovery has to be maintained. For example, I still get intrusive thoughts. Remember, they're automatic. People without OCD get intrusive thoughts. But I have to continue to let the thoughts go, will come and go, to prevent relapse. So, if you get a lapse, by the way, try not to worry too much, because a lapse is just a slip up. It's not a full-blown relapse. We're all human, and so it can happen from time to time that you might give into a compulsion and then think, oh no, what have I done? But don't beat yourself up over that. It's a minor slip up, and you can rein yourself back and carry on as you were. Now, when you do ERP and you do reach recovery, you notice that the part of the brain that scans for danger and arouses anxiety becomes less active. In other words, you become indifferent about intrusive thoughts and therefore less anxious about them, and that's how I felt what happened with me. I remember when I no longer felt the sting from many frightening triggers. For example, going back to the clock, catching sight of it and fearing the worst when it was about to strike 12. I can look at the clock now these days and not get anxious. I can even wait until it's about to strike 12, and I'm okay with that now. And I recall over time, the anxiety-driven urges to do compulsions had weakened. The sting I no longer felt was remission. And if anyone watching this video was OCD, or if you have a relative who has OCD, the same can happen for you or for them. My philosophy these days is that it's okay to live with risk. I realise nothing and no one can bring certainty about anything. And so I find it's easier to live with risk than worrying forever, about imagined fears, the obsessions happening for real. Like expecting to die because you didn't do a compulsion. In living with risk, I might say that's possible but unlikely, whatever that might be for you. For me, it was talking about the clock. striking 12, and if I saw it, I would die on the spot and go to hell. Now I can live with the risk that that's possible, but unlikely. So that's what I mean. And you know, it saves a lot of effort put into rituals done in vain, and living a life, you know, where you don't function the way you should be functioning, and enjoying life the way you should be enjoying life. And that's they're positive shoulds. So it's worth it to live with risk. Through my videos and blogs, my goal is to share information about OCD and related issues. I hope that you will connect with me and my insights. I do want you to see, you know, I want to help you see, you know, intrusive thoughts with a new perspective. And so through my videos, blogs, I discuss OCD with fresh concepts and evidence-based theories to help you look at this disorder with new eyes and without fear. Finally, through my lens, I will share, you know, further how I survived OCD and why becoming an advocate and advisor plays an essential role in my life and recovery today. My website is ocdtopics.com and my video channel has the same title. And I have a new blog that I would love for you to follow, and you can find this at ocdwriter.com. Just to say, some of my articles are password protected, and you can learn more about these exclusive posts at ocdwriter.com and how to get the passwords for them. In the meantime, I'd love for you to follow my current blog on there and get new content delivered directly to your inbox. And I think we're just about done. Oh, you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at OCD Topics. And that's it. So I'm thankful you're here and watching this video, and please keep in touch by subscribing to my channel and other media. Bye for now.